This is J. Krishnamurti's fourth public talk in London, 1961.
If you will allow me to talk for a little while, and then we can discuss. We have been talking the nature of the new mind. And I'm sure cannot be brought about by any will, by any desire, or through any intention of purposeful thought. But we can, I think, discover what its nature is and perhaps come to that state by understanding the various factors that prevent that state coming into being. And I would like this evening, if I may, discuss an issue which may be rather complex, but I hope we can go into it fairly fully, and if we haven't time tonight, we can go on the next time. I do not know if you have ever asked yourself why one commits oneself to something, why there is an urge to belong to something, to identify oneself with something. Why there is this compulsive urge to commit oneself to a certain idea, to a certain group, to a certain way of thought, to a cause of a particular action, and remain if one can. One commits oneself to communism, let's say. And one completely identifies oneself with those ideas, with its activities. One can see why one does, because one hopes ultimately for a utopia and all the rest of it. But I think that's only a superficial explanation. I think there's a much deeper psychological explanation why each one of us wants to belong to something. Belong to a certain person, to a certain party, to certain ideas and ideals, and so on. Why? What is the inward nature of this urge? I think first of all, there is the desire to act. And to act, one must to bring about a certain reformation, to change the world in a certain pattern. There must be cooperative action. We must do something together. to improve the road, to bring about a better sanitation and all the rest of it. So, for a collective action, it is apparently necessary that we do commit ourselves to a particular idea. That's it. This committing ourselves to something is at that level, at the level of activity. But if one begins to inquire more deeply, I think one begins to find out, doesn't one, the urge to identify with something which will give us a sense of assurance, a sense of security. I'm sure we know many people who have committed themselves to a particular political party or a particular course of action or to a particular group of religious thought. And as they go function in it, they begin soon to find out it doesn't suit them. They don't go with it. And they drop it and take up another. The former communists have dropped communism and joined something else. Why is there this urge? I think it is fairly important to find this out because I think it will open the door to inquire into this whole problem of fear. Because the mind surely is always seeking security, permanency. Permanency in relationship. The wife, with the children, the husband. Permanency in idea. Idea being knowledge and experience. And the more experience, the more certain in knowledge, the greater sense of security. It is one thing to listen to words, to a description. It's another thing to experience what those words convey. If I may suggest, I hope you are not listening to me, to the speaker, trying to capture what he means. All that I am talking about is merely to convey descriptively the nature of our own mind. And if one is not aware of one's own thoughts, one's own activities, mere description is a very superficial thing. But if through these words one begins to understand oneself, discover if the mind, if our own mind, each one's mind, is actually seeking security and what it implies, then it will have an extraordinary significance. But we're merely satisfied with words and explanation. Seems to me so utterly futile. It's like a hungry man being satisfied with words about food. So, if we could go into this question of fear, why it arises at all, not what we should do about fear. We'll come to that a little later, perhaps, and that may not be necessary at all. But why it arises, and why the mind is always seeking security, not only physically, outwardly, but inwardly. Now when we're talking about outward and inner, to me it is only a movement which is expressed outwardly as well as inwardly. It is a movement. There is no such thing as an outward world and inward world. It's like a tide going out and then coming in. And to separate the two is to bring about a division, a conflict. But to understand the inner tide, the inward movement, one must understand the outward going also. One must be aware of the things outwardly. And if one is aware of the things outwardly, and if there is no reaction to the outer, as a resistance, as a defense, as escape, then the inward movement is the same movement which is going inward, very deeply, profoundly. And if the mind can follow it, and it can only follow it when there is no division. And I think we must, if we may, a little bit think about it. See, most so-called religious people divide the outer and the inner. The outward activity as being superficial, unnecessary, evil, and the inner much more significant. And so there is a division, and so a conflict. And we discussed the whole significance of conflict the other day. And that opens up an enormous a door to enormous inquiry, which is really the whole problem of the observer and the observed. The experiencer and the thing experienced, which is again the outer and the inner. I don't want to go into that for the moment, but we'll inquire into that perhaps another time. So we are inquiring into the question of fear, not only caused by the outward events, but also the inner demand the inner compulsions, and the everlasting search for certainty. All experience makes us certain. Obviously. An experience of pleasure makes us demand more. And the more of that pleasure is the urge to be secure in pleasure. And if I love someone, and I want to be quite sure that that love is returned, and we establish a relationship of at least hoping for permanency. All our society is based on that relationship. And is there anything permanent? Anything? And is love permanent? Or we want sensation to be made permanent, and the thing which cannot be made permanent, which is love, goes by. I don't know if I'm making myself clear on that point. Again, take the question of virtue. The cultivation of virtue, which is the demand to be virtuous permanently, is essentially the desire to be secure. And is virtue ever permanent? No, sir, this is, you follow, do think about this. Let's say I'm angry, or I have lack of goodness, the sense of sympathy, affection, pity. And by cultivating non-anger, I hope to bring about a state of virtue, virtue being a commodity for convenience or as a means to something else. And is virtue to be cultivated at all? Is goodness not cultivable at all? Like humility, but that comes into being when there is only attention, which is not a thing to be gained. So take the question of being loved. Or to love. Is it possible for a mind which is ambitious to know what it is to love? And aren't we all ambitious? In some form or another. The clerk who wants to become the manager obviously can never know love. Or the saint, so-called saint who wants to achieve or to realize God, obviously has no love. Because he is still ambitious. He is concerned, occupied with himself. And as humility, which is not to be cultivated, as goodness cannot be cultivated, put into a straitjacket of discipline. Surely a mind that would understand the nature of the thing called, the word called love, must obviously be free of this sense of being secure, which means it's essentially vulnerable. And is the mind ever capable, is it ever possible to be really free of fear? We want to be secure in this world, our next meal, our health, and we want to be secure in our respectability. We want to be secure in our ideas. We want to be quite sure what happens after death. And our mind is everlastingly pursuing, if you observe it, this demand, this desire to be certain. And I do not see how the mind can be free of fear with all its frustrations, as long as the mind is seeking security. Obviously there must be physical security. We must know where the next food is coming, where you're going to sleep, and all the rest of it. And that is, fairly decent societies are organizing that. Probably in about 50 years' time, the whole of the world will have physical security. At least let's hope. That's irrelevant. But we want to be secure in our actions. We want to be secure inwardly. And And is that not the cause of fear? Fear of darkness, fear of one's neighbor, public opinion, fear of losing health, fear of not having capacity, fear of being nobody in this monstrous, aggressive, acquisitive world. Fear of not arriving, achieving, of not realizing some state of supreme happiness, bliss, or whatever it is called. And of course there is the ultimate fear of death. We are not discussing for the moment death. We're just seeing what is fear, trying to uncover what is fear. Obviously fear is something in relation to something else. There is no fear by itself, per se. There is fear in relation to something. I'm afraid of my wife. I'm afraid of not being good, not fulfilling, not achieving, and so on, so on, so on. Dozens of fears. Always in relation to something. And is it possible for the mind to stand completely alone, not isolated, not build towers, walls around itself, and so isolate itself? A mind that's completely alone, because a mind is alone but is no longer seeking security. And can one can the mind free itself so totally from all fear? You see, time is involved in fear. Time by the day, by the tomorrow. And fear exists where there is thought of tomorrow. So time is a factor of fear. Okay? Shall we go into that a little bit? I'm getting old. And that is death. From now to tomorrow. And the thought of death is the thought of fear. If there was no time, the tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, in the future, there was no time as tomorrow, would there be fear of death, of an ending? No, don't answer me, please. It's not, it is not a question of your answer me and my... But if you have gone into the question of fear, you must have uncovered this question of time. Not only tomorrow, but of the past. Which means experience. Can the mind be so alone, totally, away from the past and the future, so that it is not enclosed in the fence of time? I don't know. So, the mind is seeking security through identifying itself with an idea, with a belief, with a particular course of action, committing itself to a group of ideas, belonging to Christianity, to Hinduism, to Buddhism, to this or that. Which is also this urge to belong, which is contrary to this, to being alone. And most of us are terribly frightened of being alone. Leave that for the moment. We'll go into that a little later. Then there is conflict which arises from contradiction. And this contradiction is the demand for fulfillment. And so there is this constant urge to fulfill, to be, to become. To be something permanent. And there is the question of time. So these are all the factors of fear. We can enlarge it, we can go into greater details, but that's not of great importance for the moment. Now, having seen the picture, the feeling of the totality of the picture, can the mind wipe away all fear? Which means really, if one can put it if you will not misunderstand what is being said, to be alone without relationship. And that aloneness is not the opposite of this contradiction conflict which relationship creates. I feel in that aloneness there is real relationship, not another. In that there is no fear. Man has tackled this problem of fear for centuries, millennia. And we don't seem to be free of it. And the extreme forms of fear leads to various forms of neurosis, and so on, so on, so on. Now, can you and I be on the instant so totally free from fear? Not hypnotize ourselves and say, I am free of fear. Of course, that's silly. Now this is what I mean by seeing. By seeing the whole of fear. Which means essentially the non-being. Not the non-being of identifying yourself with something. Can we discuss this? Or there is nothing to discuss?
Fear fear for me is I'm frightened of being forced into circumstances where I have nothing more I now feel is worthwhile. Like living in some great city, working in a factory. And that's what.
So, what shall you do about it? I have to work from morning till night in London. Suppose I am in a beastly little office, with a beastly boss and all the rest of it. Going every day by bus, tube to an office. The horror of it all, the routine, the boredom, the excruciating pain. Circumstances are forcing one to do that. What shall I do? I have a responsibility. Responsibility includes wife, children, mother, and all the rest of it. I can't go away, escape into a monastery, which would also be another horror. The routine of getting every morning at 2 o'clock, saying the same old prayers to same old deities and all the rest of it. No, don't laugh it off, please. Anything to escape. In the monastery and in this world of routine, boredom, dirt, squalor, what shall I do? First of all, we are educated wrongly. Never to love the thing that one does. But that's a fact. So we are educated wrongly and I'm caught. What shall I do? And I know I can't escape. Right, sir? It would be absurd to escape. Into romanticism, into beliefs, into churches, into organizations, into utopias, into this and into that. I see the futility of it, and therefore I discard it. There's no temptation to escape. I'm left with the fact. Brutal, hard fact. What shall I do? Well, Mrs., what shall I do?
Must live with it, surely.
Huh?
But you can't do anything about that because it's the way you see it.
Lady suggests you can't do anything about it. So, have we ever lived with something without resistance? Have I lived with my anger without resistance? Lived with it. Which is not accepting it. Living with something that I know the whole inward nature of it. Living with it. Living with anger. Living with envy. Not trying to overcome it, or to suppress it, or to transform it, but to live with it. Have you ever tried to live with something beautiful? You know, something really beautiful. A picture. A lovely scenery. A superb, magnificent mountain. With a view that is enormous. Have you ever lived with it? What happens if we do live with it? You soon get used to it. Wait, please just, you get used to it. You've seen it the first time. That has given you a certain sense of release, perception, beauty, and then after a few days it fades away. You get used to it. Look at all the peasants in the world with marvelous scenery around them. They have got used to it. And the squalor of modern cities, the dirt, the filth, the appalling brutality of it all, the ugliness, the cruelty, we get used to that also. To live with either beauty or with ugliness and not get used to them requires an astonishing energy, doesn't it? I don't know. Not to be overpowered by the ugliness, nor by beauty, but to live with both of them requires extraordinary sensitivity and energy. Which means the capacity to digest both and not be slave to both. Can one do it? Huh? Do please think it out with me. The problem of energy is quite interesting. Food doesn't give energy. The energy of which I am talking about. Sorry. Food does give energy of a certain type. But to live with evil and to live with love demands a totally different kind of energy than the food, than the energy that you get through food. And how does one come by this energy? Which is essentially the nature of the new mind. Surely one comes by it when there is no fear, when there is no conflict. When you don't want to be something. When you live totally anonymously. So what's good of my talking all this? Talking about all this. Surely all this implies an extraordinary perception of the outer and the inner. And most of us are too tired, too old, too living in the past or in our work or in some other dark dungeon of our being. So what shall we do? So come back to our first question. Can the mind free itself on the instant from all urge, from all demand to be secure? To live in a state of complete uncertainty without going mad.
Excuse me, can't there also be, for example, if one has a work that one enjoys very much, can't there also be becoming too much attached? Is that something?
Question is asked, if one is attached too much to one's work which one loves, is that not also fear? Yes, sir. Because you may lose your capacity. You know, capacity is a dreadful thing because it gives you a very good escape. A gift of some kind, if you're a good painter. A good talker. You have the capacity to write, to put together words. Capacity as an engineer. It gives you such extraordinary sense of security, confidence. And in this competitive, acquisitive world, if you have not confidence, you are lost, you are gone. Surely to find God, or whatever you like to call it, the mind must be totally empty, mustn't it? Of having no capacity, of having no knowledge, no experience. So no fear, something completely innocent, fresh, young.
That seems to be the end of myself as I know myself completely. To all those.
Yes, sir, surely. I don't know if you have ever tried to live a day so completely that there is no yesterday and no tomorrow. Which requires a great deal of understanding of the past. The past is not only the word, the language, the thought, but the looking back to yesterday and all its roots in the present. Do the things that was one done wrong, said things that were not true, hurt, done damage to somebody, to completely let go of all that, all the pleasures, the pains, the memories, let go. I don't know if you ever tried it. Just to walk out of it. One can't walk out of it if there is a regret. Or the things remembered which were pleasurable. To let absolutely go. You try it sometime. Not because I say so, not because you're going to get a reward out of it, or some extraordinary experience. If you do, it will be just an exchange, a barter. But if you've gone into it, it's really quite extraordinary how the mind can completely be timeless, though it is the result of time.
So habit forms quite a large part of what you're talking about, Charlie. Habit.
Yes, sir.
Habit and memory. One sees, sometimes we're very lucky, one sees how false that is, and it's gone for the moment. Is it just that we don't see deeply enough to wipe out the whole mark of that habit? Because it does seem to lose strength, but it comes back. Is it just a question of intensity?
You heard all that question? No? Question is, habit is so strong, and when one really looks at it, sometimes it drops away. Perhaps it becomes weaker, but it keeps on repeating. Is it a question of right attention? Is that it, sir?
Yes.
You see, I don't know. I'm answering a question. We are discussing, sir. We are texting. I'm not answering your question. You know, the mind has to be occupied. With most of us, it is so. Mind has to be occupied with something. With the kitchen, with the babies, with the house, with the job, with its own vanities and virtues, occupied. And the occupation becomes habit. Right, sir? Now, why has the mind to be occupied? Doesn't matter whether it is occupied with sex, with God, or with virtue, it's just the same, occupation. There's no noble occupation or ignoble occupation. It's occupation. I don't know if you agree to that, if you see that. Mere substitution of occupation is no release from occupation. Now, why has the mind to be occupied? What's up? It said it may be escaping. Escaping from what? Escaping from its own frustrations. Escaping, all right. No, you're not answering. You're giving me an explanation. I can give you an explanation also. That's not what we're trying to do. That's not the intention of this discussion.
No, it was meant as a question, not as an answer.
It's a question. It's escaping, all right. No, go a little bit further, sir. Don't go into it. Why is the mind occupied? You say it's escape.
Fear.
Fear. Yes, sir, go on adding more. And then what? Wait a minute, you have added 10 reasons, explanations, and then what? I'm not being cynical or rude or rough. We have explained. But you haven't yet, the mind isn't free from occupation.
Because the mind is occupation.
No, the gentleman says, mind is occupation. The mind that is not occupied is not a mind. The mind that is not active, thinking, functioning, inquiring, searching, asking, demanding, responding, challenging, is not a mind. Those are all the symptoms of the mind. It is not the mind. So the word door, the word tree is not the door, the tree. I don't know. Semantically, these two things are entirely different. Do I realize, does the mind realize itself as occupation? Or is there a mind which says, I am occupied? I don't know if am I?
Yes, that's clear. What you're saying is that where the mind is in fact occupation, but we're twisting round onto that and trying to do something about that occupation. But in fact,
No, not only that, sir. Not only that. I'm trying to say, I want to find out why the mind insists on being occupied. I'm saying if it is not occupied, it's not mind. If it is not active, it's not responding, it's not challenging, it's not empowering, it's not, all the rest of it, it's not a mind. Why do we say that? Is occupation, inquiry, search, defense, response, anxiety, fear, guilt, is that the mind? Is that the nature of the mind? If that is not there, if those things aren't there, is there no mind?
The mind on one level, but not all the mind.
The mind is on one level, it suggests. It's not the totality of the mind. That's all we know, isn't it, sir? That's all we know. The anxiety, the guilt, the fear, And what is the totality of the mind? As we know. The totality of the mind as we know is the unconscious as well as the conscious. Look, please, I must go back. We asked ourselves why the mind is occupied.
It can only be occupied if it has memory.
Yes, sir? But may I just talk 2 minutes? Do listen. Not that I want to take all the time sitting on the platform and all the rest of it. Why is the mind occupied? What would happen if the mind was not occupied?
Attention. If the mind is not occupied, there is deep attention.
No, not if. No, you see,
When?
Not when. I don't want to think conditionally. If this takes place, that will happen. You follow? That's not, to me, that's not thinking at all. Wait a minute. I want to find out why my mind is occupied.
The mind is all the time reacting
Yes, sir?
to various stimuli.
Yes, all right. All right.
That is the process of being occupied.
Yes. Have you ever tried not being occupied?
Yes.
Having no occupation, you understand? No thought which says, no thought at all. Because every thought is occupation. With something.
It's impossible to try.
Huh?
It's impossible to try.
What do you mean impossible to try?
If the mind is to be empty, one can't make really.
No, sir. I don't mean try. It's a word. Let's. Has it ever happened to you when thought has come to an end? Not one thought, please don't misunderstand. Not one thought which has got out and beaten it to death. I don't mean that. Thought. Because the moment when there is thought, there is occupation. Thought sets a habit. You see, that brings us back to the question. Thought is fear.
Are we afraid of ceasing when thought ceases?
Partly, aren't we? So, have you looked at anything without thought? I don't mean blank. You're all there, you're fully attentive. Your whole being is there. But have you looked at something in that state in which there is no thought?
Yes.
Huh?
Not consciousness there, perhaps sometimes.
Have you looked at a flower without naming it? Without saying how beautiful it is? Saying what a lovely color it is? And so on, so on. The chattering of the mind. Looked at it. Without any judgment, evaluation. You see, if we could look into the problem of fear without any resistance, without accepting or judging, merely to observe it taking place within oneself and live with it. The living with it requires enormous energy, so as the mind is completely giving its attention to it. I hear a statement. Somebody tells me you are a very arrogant man. Many people tell me many things, and this and that. Every statement that they make, I live with it. I do. I'm talking, if you'll forgive me for a few minutes, about myself. I live with it. I don't resist it. I neither say it's right or wrong. And to live with it requires attention, to see if it is true with what somebody has said. Attention is energy. Attention is the whole, energy is the whole universe and all the rest of that. That's irrelevant for the moment. but to live with it and not distort it. Not to say, well, I've been told that before, I'm not like that. Or I'm like that. I must change. You follow? But to live with it. To live with the unpleasant and to live with the pleasant. To live with suffering. Whether it's a toothache or some other form of suffering. See? To live with fear without going mad. To live with it. You see, we want to live with the pleasant things. I had a lovely experience yesterday, I want to live with it. It's dead, gone, and I want to live with something that's gone, dead. Therefore, I only live with the memory of something of yesterday, however pleasant. The same thing but with suffering, I don't want to live with it. I want to find a way out, quick. But to live with both. Not asking for a solution, not asking for an answer. And not going to sleep with it. You see, this is meditation. I mustn't, sorry, straight fast. We'll continue with this question day after tomorrow evening, but can't we, or in the meantime, really there is no such thing as in the meantime, is there? There's an old game in the meantime. It's an old man's game, a deadly game.